Intern hello, sorry. I think it's starting now. Hello and welcome to the Mongabay Q&A for interns with Mongabay staff. We're doing this as a live event, so it's being recorded. So we're actually doing this a few minutes early, so the call won't get started for another few minutes. But we appreciate your patience and we look forward to talking with you soon. Hello again. Again, this is the Mongabay Q&A with interns and Mongabay staff. We're doing this event live, so we've called in a little bit early, so that's why I've departed from the screen and there's silence, but the call will get started very soon, so we appreciate your patience. Okay, good. Welcome to the call, Jeremy. Mute yourself.
Thanks. Mute myself. I am muted.
So once again, this is a live Mongabay Q&A for our interns, and we're just doing this a little bit early, so there's going to be some silence for a while we're waiting for everyone to jump on. So we appreciate your patience. We'll get started very soon. Thank you. All right, if you are joining in on the live event, this is the Mongabay live Q&A answer session. We have started it a few minutes early to give people time to come on, so that is why we are just sitting here in random silence. So we appreciate your patience, but we'll be getting started really soon. Thanks. Once again, if you're just joining, we are just giving some time for people to jump on the call. Rhett just joined. Welcome, Rhett. And we're just going to give people a few minutes to jump on. So we're just going to sit here in pleasant silence. So welcome. Hello.
Hey.
It's great to have you. All right. So we're just giving people a few minutes to jump on.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Hope everybody's having a great day. It is Friday. It's quite the time for a work-related call, but we appreciate you making it work because that was the best time that worked for everybody. So we appreciate it. Not at the moment. Start.
Can't hear you, Rhett.
No.
Still, yeah.
Hi, Jordana. Welcome.
Hi.
And if you guys are just jumping on, I am going to go ahead and mute you just because we have a lot of people on the call. And so we want to make sure that there's not a ton of background noise. So if you want to ask a question, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself. I think you can do it at the top. There's a top menu with a little microphone icon. And so go ahead and unmute yourself when we get to that part in the call, but I'm not trying to be rude. I just want to make sure that Jeremy and I are actually also sitting in like almost the same room, so there'll be some feedback unless we mute at random opposite times. Rhett, are you having any luck? Because this will be a funny call if we can't hear you. And we can't hear you. I can see you talking, but I don't think we can hear you. Sorry. All right, we appreciate everyone's patience. We've got some people on the live call, and I think some people are watching via YouTube. So just give us a few minutes, and Rhett will make sure he kind of gets set up so he can speak on the call, which will be good. But in a few minutes, we can get started, and Jeremy can answer the first couple of questions as well. But welcome. It's nice to see you all. It's so good to see people in person when we work so much via email. All right, so we'll just give it another minute or two. Welcome, Brittany. All right. Great. Okay. So as people are joining, I'm just saying I'm going ahead and muting you manually. So if you want to talk, you're more than welcome to. Just click the microphone icon on the top. And unmute yourself when you want to talk, and then just go ahead and remute yourself so you don't get too much background noise on the call. All right. Great. And, I'm going to start by saying that Morgan, unfortunately, is not feeling well and sends her regards. She's feeling a little under the weather, so she thought it might not be the best idea to be on the call at that moment. So she does say a big hello. And, yeah, welcome. All right, so I think let's go ahead and get started. Hey, there's Rhett.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. There's two of you. I think it's that one that we can hear. So I'm going to mute your other one just in case, not that we could hear it. But all right, great. So let's get started. Hello. All right. Sorry, I'm just doing some admin here. Hello, welcome, Liz.
Welcome.
I'm just telling I'm telling everyone that I'm muting you as you come in. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to keep up background noise. So go ahead and unmute yourself at the top button if you want to speak, and we'd love to have you, at different points. And then go ahead and remute yourself when you're done talking, so we don't get too much background noise. So Rhett, let's get started, and Jeremy. We could do introductions, but I think that'll just take a little bit too long, and I want to get to your questions. So welcome, everyone. I think you probably know I'm Tiffany. Jeremy, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and say a quick hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy. I do some of the editing for you guys, and I'm also one of the writers and editors for the site as a whole. And thanks so much for all of you for coming, and for those of you who are going to watch on YouTube later, I hope it's entertaining.
And I'm Rhett. I'm the founder of Mongabay. Thank you all for joining.
Great. All right. So I have a list of questions. People sent questions before, which I really appreciate. And even if you didn't, I imagine a lot of the questions were actually very similar. And we can also have a point where the people that are on the live call can jump in with their own questions. But let's just start a little bit, Rhett, with, how do you start a website like Mongabay? What were your steps? What were the kind of pragmatic realities that you had to overcome to found this organization?
Well, I think it helped that I didn't set out trying to start a popular website. So really, there's a lot of serendipity involved. I was really passionate about the issue and just started creating a lot of content and eventually put that up online. And then as time went on, it got more and more popular, and then it developed into an organization. And then fast forward 10 years from when I founded it, I hired Jeremy. And then 2 years ago, it became a nonprofit, so we really scaled up quite a lot over the past 15 years.
I forgot to unmute myself, so now I'm unmuted. Alrighty. So, yeah, talking about founding Mongabay, and then so Victor and Alex both had kind of the same question. And I think it'd be interesting to hear this at the beginning of the call because it can kind of frame some of the rest of the questions of the things we talk about. So, there are so many environmental conservation issues that need urgent attention. Talk a little bit about what the main issues for Mongabay as an organization are hoping to focus on, in the past few years, in the coming year. What is the next big project? Kind of talk about the future of Mongabay.
Well, so historically, Mongabay is focused on rainforests, so tropical rainforests. Over time, that's expanded into conservation generally, but especially around wildlife. So that was probably the focus of the first 10 years, but going forward, we're doing more and more oceans issues, and I expect to still do a lot on forests, oceans, and wildlife, but we are expanding. Next year, we're expanding this program where we have this network of contributors around the world, and so recently I've been trying to fundraise for that and build up some money to support the program. But essentially, we should have some new topics coming online in the next few months, and so there should be a lot more opportunities. But we will stay kind of in the environmental focus and more international rather than domestic issues. Great.
All right. So let's move on. So Jeremy, why don't you start us off with this one, and Rhett, you can add things as we come along. But a lot of people, so like Liz, who's on the live call here, and Ariel, a couple other people had some questions about, like, where do you get your article, the stories that we write articles about? Do you have any favorite journals or university sources, or, how do you choose outside, sources for commenting on a study? Just generally talk about, like, the logistics of the work we do every day.
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted? Okay. So there's a number of places that we get our stories. Both Rhett and I get a bunch of emails from lots of different people around the world, researchers now included, scientists, conservationists, so a lot of good stories come directly from scientists and conservationists, or just activists who are working in the field. We have, over the years, Rhett has a huge number of contacts, and I've been building up some over the years too. So we get a lot of our stories directly from sort of the sources, which is really fun. But yeah, we also do a lot of looking at various scientific journals. We keep track of what press releases are coming out from the journals, but also the journals themselves. We also just go through blogs. We go through a lot of different websites that are doing good coverage and quality coverage of environmental issues, and so we all kind of have our different blogs that we go to and check on a daily basis, as well as going through our emails and everything. And stories just kind of come out of those. I would say those are sort of the main places. But we also are increasingly getting more sort of stories from correspondents that we've been working with, from interns. You guys can always feel free to pitch us stories. We love that. It's great to get stories that don't otherwise get covered elsewhere, because there's a lot of good science going on, but a lot of that also gets covered pretty largely, and so it's great when we can cover something that hasn't gotten much attention so far. And I think that's about it. Rhett, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I personally use Google News alerts a lot, and so I have maybe I don't know, 30 different alerts set up, and so whenever there's a news story happening, it kind of pops up in my email. I actually don't read any blogs or news websites, so I'm maybe a little different, but I basically rely entirely on email. So as Jerry mentioned, I have a big network of people now who just send me too much email. Eureka Alert is also a really good resource. It's basically a press release distribution service, and most of the major press releases from journals will go out through Eureka Alert. We also monitor probably, I don't know, a couple hundred journals through kind of various systems, so we're pretty aware of what's happening. There's 3 journals in particular that we watch pretty closely, which are Nature, PNAS, and Science.
Great. All right. So let's see what the next one is here. Ariel had a great question, and I know this has been one that interns have talked about in the past. So as an environmental journalist, one is constantly being made aware of all of the issues that our world is facing. Some of them are potentially fatal to the, potentially fatal to the human population. I'm trying to read this directly. So how do you guys, as environmental journalists, cope with the emotions, I guess, that are brought on by the reporting that we're doing? You gotta unmute yourself.
Wait, am I unmuted? Sorry.
Now you're good.
Okay. I just was actually asking who should go first, but I will go first then. I actually went and saw Interstellar last night, and so basically I now know that the human race is just going to leave the Earth behind, and we'll just get a new planet, and we'll settle there, and it's all going to be good. It's going to be fine. Yeah, so the question was basically how do we deal with it, or how do we sort of figure out which are the most important? I think the feeling of most important is a bit tricky. I think they're all important. I think one thing that Mongabay has done really well, and one thing that we've been focused on, is focusing on stories that don't get out there as much. So that's why we do a lot of tropical forests and wildlife. Climate change is getting increasingly good coverage, though I think it needs a lot more coverage and a lot better coverage than it's getting, but it's still getting a flood of coverage in the last few years. So we've been kind of our niche has been the tropics and wildlife. So that's one area that doesn't get a lot of coverage elsewhere. I think people have different ways of dealing with this. I mean, I think it's the world has a lot of problems and a lot of issues. I think Rhett can speak to sort of how he deals with it personally. I think I have to find hope in various places and feel like at least we're trying and we're getting the news out there, and I think we've seen our coverage make differences in various places, so that always feels great. And I think there is been some hopeful news in the last few years, both on sort of climate issues, on forest issues. I would say probably wildlife is still an issue. I'd love to see more good news, but I always try and grab those good news stories just for my own benefit to keep me going. But it's one of those things where whenever I think as human beings we have a responsibility whenever we see these kinds of injustices, whether it's social or environmental, to at least be aware of them and try and do our best in the time that we have to steer the world in a direction that I think is just and sustainable. It's not always easy, but but that's, I mean, it's kind of, at least it's a job where I feel like there's meaning, and we're trying to make a difference, and I think we do. So that's something that helps me every day. I try and remember that. Rhett, do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah. So originally, I just covered what I was interested in, but as Mongabay has got grown, so it's responsibility. So it's no longer kind of Rhett's favorite topics, which worked maybe 10 years ago. We actually have to respond to reader interests. So essentially, that's what we do. We respond to what readers are interested in. So that's one reason why Mongabay does less climate change coverage these days, because there's been a whole lot of sites that have emerged over the last, 5 to 8 years, say, that really focus on climate coverage and do probably a better job than we do on it. And our readers aren't that interested in a lot of the climate change stuff, so I feel that these other sites do a great job with it, so we should focus on where our strengths are. So that tends to be conservation, wildlife, tropical forests, oceans, things like that, and less kind of on the climate policy stuff. In terms of how I cope with all the horrible things happening every day, I'm actually an optimist by nature, so I think that really helps. I guess I've seen so many terrible things in my life, I just sort of realize that dwelling on things doesn't really help, and you just try to work through it. And I also know that Mongabay does have impact, so one way that we can try to make things better is through our reporting.
Great. Thank you. That's both really helpful. So I'm actually going to put, I think you all know that our staff is pretty small, especially in the U.S. team. We have a Mongabay Indonesia site as well, and they about double our staff size. But in terms of the U.S., so I talked about Morgan, unfortunately, is not able to be on this call because she's not feeling well, so she sends her regards. We have Jeremy and Rhett and myself, and then I'm going to put Brittany on the spot. She's on the live call too. And Brittany has been with us for quite a few years, and she started as an intern at Mongabay and has moved into a part-time role. So Brittany, could you just talk a little bit about your experience kind of at the beginning of this program, and how you felt seeing the Mongabay internship program kind of move forward? You have to unmute yourself, that's the only problem. Hold on, let me try to unmute you. I don't think I can. If you go to your top row and unclick the microphone.
Okay, I think I'm on now.
Good.
Okay, hi everyone. I am the translation coordinator for Mongabay. When I started with Mongabay, I was in the role of helping with fundraising, and that was really just getting started. So there was a lot of learning involved, and Tiffany was really great at helping me and showing me the way and how to do those tasks. And since then, I've learned a lot, and all the programs have grown a lot. I know just from doing translations that we grew quite a bit, I know, last year, and brought on a whole bunch of new volunteers. So it's been a really great experience, and I've learned a lot, and I just want to say that you all definitely are a part of a great program, and should definitely help you in your future endeavors. Is there anything specifically that you wanted me to talk about?
No, really, I just wanted to introduce you and kind of let you talk a little bit and tell everyone. But another reason why I wanted you to talk a little bit is just because, what's great, I think, about this program is that we get to know you really well, in the work that you're doing for us. And we've actually had quite a number of former interns who have either, joined part-time staff or done some projects with us or applied to be contributors to our Global Forest Reporting Network, and we find that is fantastic. So we really appreciate that you're doing this work, and we understand that it is an unpaid internship, which is unfortunate because we would love to pay you, and the work you're doing is certainly of very high value. But just so you know, we consider you all a part of the Mongabay family now.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to second that. And well, first of all, Brittany's done a great job for us. I mean, it's not really apparent, but she's managing something like 120 translators, which is, when I tell people, they're pretty amazed. But yeah, we do rely a lot on our interns in terms of future positions. So, you know, we recruit from the pool of interns, but for both our contributor program, but also some of the growth we'll have in the future. I'd expect our interns to be, you know, well positioned because they know how we run things. We've also had a bunch of interns get jobs with other journalism outfits and other things after they've worked with us. So that's been really exciting to see as well.
Yeah, and if there's ever any, you know, help that we can provide in terms of future career, I mean, whenever I see opportunities that I think are applicable, I try to send them out. But, you know, we are always more than willing to lend a hand, whether that's letters of recommendation or anything other than that. I assume you guys all know that, but just thought I'd take the moment live so you could see my face and gauge my sincerity that we really want to help you in whatever you choose to do.
Also, Jeremy started as an intern as well. So he started in 2007, I think, and did occasional articles while he was wrapping up his master's, I think. Anyway, he did that, and then eventually he joined Mongabay as our first employee. So he doubled our staff. So, and what it's now 5 full years, I think, you've been with us, or almost 6 years maybe.
Yeah. It's getting longer. Okay, so I think right now I have a bunch of other questions that people sent in beforehand, but I wanted to take a moment, and if anyone who is on the live call wants to unmute yourself and ask a question to anyone, feel free to go ahead and do that. I'll try and track it on my end, not double up any questions, but there might be a little bit of speaking over each other, but that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to these weird things. So go ahead. If you don't, we'll give it a minute or two, and if you don't unmute yourself and ask a question, I can keep going. I'm like watching all your faces. These things are so funny. All right. Any takers?
Maybe if someone wanted to signal with their hand or something at some point.
That's true. I think you can unmute yourself, but yeah, exactly. I'll watch your faces too, and if I catch that you're wanting to ask a question, I can do that. So I'll give you a few more minutes to think about it, and I'll keep moving on with other questions here. I'm unmuted, right? Okay. Just double checking. All right. So I got a question from Alex via email, and I thought this was interesting. It said Mongabay has a very impressive board member list. So I guess, Rhett, this would be a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about your relationships with a few of them? Notably, we welcomed Jane Goodall to the board just a little bit back in October. Also, Tim Kelly. Just talk a little bit about what that was like building a board and kind of what they do.
Well, the board is still a work in progress, so that may be changing over the next few months. But essentially, the history is Mongabay. I started Mongabay as kind of a side project, so I had a real job and was doing my real job, 50 hours a week, and then I was working on Mongabay nights and weekends. And then in 2004, I quit my job and started doing Mongabay full time. So Mongabay in those days was a for-profit business, and so it was based off advertising revenue. But when the financial crisis hit, the online advertising market for green products collapsed. And it's actually been collapsing at an accelerating rate every year. So that's why the New York Times laid off all the environmental reporters, NPR laid off environmental reporters, CNN laid off their science desk. So that's why we're seeing all these trends. It's because there's essentially no money, there's no business anymore. And so kind of seeing the writing on the wall a few years ago, I decided that we had to become a nonprofit. And so that's what I did in 2012. Mongabay launched a nonprofit. And now the nonprofit is much bigger than the for-profit ever was, which is really good for us because it's enabled us to do all sorts of new stuff. And so one of the requirements of having a nonprofit is to build a board. And so my board started out as essentially friends and family of Rhett. And over time, I just reached out to some of my contacts and invited them to join the board. And so that's kind of how I've gotten these board members. But when building a board, you learn things. Like there's certain skills that are really helpful, and for Mongabay, we're really strong, on science and things like that. So having board members who are strong scientists isn't really quite as critical at this point. We're more in need of board members who can help with fundraising and things like that. So I'm trying to round out the board a little bit more in terms of finding people who might be able to help with that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a process. by law, we have to have board meetings every so often, and so we all get together and talk about the future of Mongabay. So it's been an interesting experience, and I think it's helpful having people to bounce ideas off of.
I'm unmuted. What was in terms of, I mean, did people find you to become, how did you find Jane Goodall? How did you make that connection? How did Tim Kelly, and maybe talk a little bit about who he is and let people know, just kind of give a little quick profile.
Yeah, so the process of getting board members essentially, well, for me, has been to reach out to somebody, so someone that I know or someone I just met, I guess, and kind of getting a feel for what their interests are and their time availability is, and then asking them if they'd like to join the board. And so Tim Kelly was the president of National Geographic and the president of the National Geographic Society, and so he actually started National Geographic TV, and eventually just got frustrated with the direction that the channel was going. His view was the National Geographic's brand was going to increasingly be linked to its TV channel, and so when they're running Hillbillies and Moonshine type reality TV shows a lot of the time, it's not really good for the brand. So anyway, he eventually left National Geographic. But when I met him, it was at a wildlife conservation film festival in New York, and it was this crazy thing where I was in Indonesia and I had to get to New York, and there was Hurricane Sandy had just hit, and so basically I had to. It was a pretty tight connection, but I flew in from Indonesia, like 37 hours in transit, landed, and then because of Hurricane Sandy, the transportation took forever, and so I got to this event where I was giving the keynote literally 5 minutes before I was supposed to be on stage. So it was very last minute, and so I just basically walked in and walked up on stage and gave a talk, and Tim Kelly was there, and I guess was a fan of Mongabay, which was really cool to know. And then we went out to dinner afterwards and became friends. And then I asked if he'd be interested in joining the board, thinking it was kind of a long shot. But then he said yes, so that was pretty cool. Jane Goodall, I discovered maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, was a big Mongabay fan. I just had no idea. And so I met with her at an event here in San Francisco. And then for the day before her birthday, I hung out with her quite a bit. And then I went to her birthday this past February, April was in San Francisco as well. So we just become friends, I guess, over the last couple of years. And I asked her if she would join the board, again thinking that it was kind of a long shot. She said yes. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Sometimes long shots pay off. Okay, great. Let's see. Let's keep moving. How about, let's talk about advice. We're going to move on to an advice section. So Liz, who is on the live call, thank you so much for sending such great questions in advance. I'm just going to save them for you so I don't make you unmute yourself. So Liz asks, when you're going after fellowships or a reporting initiative, how do you communicate with editors? I mean, what's your advice for pitching to various editors? I know that we kind of are in-house in Mongabay, but I'm sure you've talked to enough journalists and got enough sense of giving some advice when people are kind of sending stuff out into the world. Jeremy or Rhett, you both can speak to this.
I think I'll let Jeremy take that because my experience is kind of abnormal, so I'm not sure I have the best advice. But I'll let him go first, and then maybe I'll jump in.
Sure, pass that one on to me. All right. I don't, my sense of it is a little abnormal too, just because I started with Mongabay and have been there for the entirety of my career. But I think with working with editors, I think the best thing to do with working with editors that you might not have worked with before or sending out a pitch is to make sure that you have a compelling, unique story that you can kind of pitch it in a few sentences, but also make sure that you already have people kind of lined up and have a good idea of who you're going to contact. Maybe I've already contacted them, see if they'd be willing to work with you and work with you quickly if it's a very close deadline kind of a thing. So I think a lot of it's the prep work. A lot of it is getting a good, unique story that is going to fit the market. I mean, a lot of it is looking at a site, finding out what they've covered in the past, watching them for a while, figure out what they're interested in. For example, if you're going to pitch to a Mongabay, we get some weird pitches sometimes, or some articles sent to us that are really off of our focus, and so that's a waste of their time to send it to us. So, and it's a waste of our time to sort of spend a lot of time going through it. So really, I would say, know the market, know the editor, or know what they're looking for, and then do some of your groundwork before you do the pitch, so that you don't kind of come in there and not really have a good background on the subject and not really know who you're going to talk to. And so I think that's, and I think I always play up, if you've been an intern with us, use that. Definitely use that. You have publications to your name. You've been published on a well-known, well-respected site. So use that, and also you can always use us and check in with us and say, hey, do you have a contact here? Have you ever worked with the site before? Do you know any of these people? Certainly feel free to reach out to us. But it is a lot. Journalism, like anything else, is kind of, it's like getting your foot in the door, and once you get that foot in the door, then it's kind of like building up a reputation and knowing people. But it's really, the hardest part is getting your first publications, getting your foot in the door, and then it's just a lot of perseverance and knocking and pushing and just kind of and some patience and waiting. But if you do good writing, if you work hard, if you're willing to take edits and those kind of things, then it's a lot of it then comes down to perseverance and really putting in a lot of legwork ahead of time. And it is a lot of work for sometimes a lot of patience, and sometimes things don't work out. But I think it's definitely great to apply to grants, apply to fellowships, and I think it's a great idea to just get yourself pitched out there. We have a number of journalists who've been very successful. I'll drop Shreya's name, for example. She's won a number of grants. She's been published in The Guardian. She's been published in a few other places, and she's a correspondent with us now. So we have people who have really built up sort of a freelance career, or are in the process of building up a freelance career, who a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, were interns with us, and are still working with us, but also working with other places. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities out there. It's mostly about pursuing them, and we've also, like I said, we're a really good resource. The problem is that we don't always reach out to interns and say, hey, like, I haven't seen you in 6 months. What can we help you with? So you need to reach out to us and say, here's what I need. Do you know an intern here? Take a look at my pitch, see if it's good, and I'll definitely take time. And I know Morgan would take time to do that as well. So that's something definitely to use. Rhett, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so you basically covered the key things I would have said, but just to reiterate, you should definitely know the publication you're pitching to. We get a lot of of pitches that are not relevant to what we cover whatsoever, or just not in the style. It's like someone's writing their personal opinion about something. If it's a fellowship, you should always read the directions and read about the organization. Again, just a lot of people will reach out to an organization without having done any work whatsoever, and so it kind of wrong foots you if you come in with pitching an idea that's not consistent with a publication or like a fellowship. You should also have a good elevator pitch for your story. It helps to keep the first email short, because a lot of editors are really busy and they're not going to read through like a 6-paragraph thing. So try to figure out something that'll whet their appetite. Mention your credentials, mention your cool story idea, and then kind of go from there. Actually, I'd almost say that your credentials are maybe secondary to what your pitch is, because I know at Mongabay we are not, well, at least I don't worry too much about where someone went to college or things like that. I'm more interested in how passionate they are and what they can do for us now. In terms of outlets, we do have an editor at Vice now who has indicated that he's really interested in taking pitches from Mongabay people. So that's something to keep in mind. Vice is a little bit edgier a source or a publication, so it could be interesting. And then also we have a relationship with Take Part, which is it's kind of like a petition type thing crossed with Vice, I would call it. And then a lot of our stories are now redistributed via media partners as well. So things like The Guardian, Environmental News Network. Yeah, and we should have some other partners coming in soon. So that's another thing to put in your resume. You could do if you do a story for Mongabay and it gets picked up by The Guardian, then you've written for both Mongabay and The Guardian. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we're always here as a resource. Jeremy and Morgan and Rhett have contacts at different places. They have the journalism experience. They can help craft an elevator pitch or help edit it. I also have a lot of experience with applications and resumes, so more like on the end if you're applying for a certain fellowship and it's kind of a certain grant or a certain application process. I I have a lot of experience with kind of detailing that. And also I can help provide context for your Mongabay articles. So if you're trying to put into someone who might not have heard Mongabay but want to say, you know, kind of what the readership was of your articles or what the readership of Mongabay is, just to kind of put that into context, I am always more than happy to do that. So really the point is we're always here to help you, and so just all it takes is to reach out and we'll do the best we can. All right. So let me find the next question here. These are going well. So on the topic of advice still, Ariel sent this question in advance. Could you guys give some advice on to how journalists can progress from writing articles remotely to getting on the ground and reporting in the field, kind of how people can get there, and also just any tips for travel, reporting in the field, things like
that? Sure, I'll start off with that one. So, you know, when I started Mongabay, I basically did my own travel, so I would go to a place and do stories, which is kind of, I guess it's a normal approach, but you know, I wasn't getting paid by a newspaper or anyone for that travel. So now Mongabay has these small grants, which we will keep offering for reporting on certain topics. So you know, that could be useful for getting over to a place, and then you could do a story from Mongabay, but maybe there's some other stories that you could explore while you're in a location. So I would strongly encourage you, if you're interested, to look into our contributor program, which will really start to scale up next year, because I think that will provide good opportunities for people who, you know, who may not have had those opportunities before. In terms of other outlets, I'm not exactly sure how it works with, you know, people like places like The Guardian, but another organization we want to come familiar with is the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting. They offer grants for travel because of the trends and kind of in the newspaper industry, but especially with environmental media, it's pretty hard to find a newspaper or, you know, any sort of media outlet that will pay for your expenses on, you know, investigative reporting. So it is important to be resourceful and look for other opportunities. And so again, the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting gives a lot of grants around environmental topics. So that's also to look into. The other thing that people maybe overlook is the whole idea of kind of voluntourism or just volunteering for NGOs. So there are a lot of cool projects that are out in the field where you go to a place for a while and, you know, help count sea turtles or whatever. But when you're there, you can, you know, look into stories and take pictures and, you know, get ideas for future reporting.
And in addition to Pulitzer, which is a great resource, I would also say the Society for Environmental Journalists also has a grant fund, and that's one, you know, specifically tailored to the environment. So if you're thinking about reporting on that, I would look into that as well. Jeremy, do you have anything to add about travel, or just talking a little bit about your own travel and writing experience?
Yeah. Wait, am I? Okay. Yeah. I think if you're just looking to get, you know, maybe just write some stories that are not remotely written, which is honestly most of what we do at Mongabay is remotely written. Is also to look at local stories. I mean, the environmental stories. There's stories local all the time. So whatever state you live in, if you want to, you know, look around for there's always great newspapers or great magazines focused on specific areas or specific states or specific countries wherever you're living. And there's a lot of really, you know, you can dig up a lot of really interesting things. You can just, you know, get on your bike, take your car, whatever transfer you use, and try and do a local story. And I think that's a good way to sort of get experience as to how it's different to write from the field rather than to sort of write remotely, which is a very different thing. And I think it's I think every journalist should have as much experience as they can of that. As far as traveling goes, I think Rhett and Tiffany really covered a lot of its grants, a lot of its grants and fellowships at this point. Or if you get yourself on, like, you know, hired by a news organization that still sort of funds travel, or writers, you know, journalists that actually get to travel, which is, I think, difficult, and there aren't as many places doing that. But, you know, there are still journalists who work, you know, in various places around the world and sort of stay in one region and really cover that region thoroughly. So those jobs still are out there. But I think it really has to be a lot more creativity to get yourself. And I think Rhett's idea of volunteering while you travel, or, you know, if you're going to go on a trip for a vacation or whatever, you know, maybe take a couple days to also go visit a certain site with some conservation or environmental issues that you might be able to cover, or just do a travel piece on it. You know, there's always sources looking for good stories. So I think it's really thinking creatively and maybe starting in your own backyard and then looking at going further afield once you have some more experience and stuff. But it's really fun to write stories when you've actually been to the place, and it gives such a different color, and I think such a better sense of, you can get ingrained in the complexity a little bit more. But it's obviously part of it is, you know, it's the expense, and now that we live in this digital internet age, it's a lot easier to sort of do stories remotely, and that allows us to do a lot more. But you know, I think it's great to get that experience, because there's nothing like actually being in the place and seeing what's happening on the ground.
The other thing to keep in mind is that when you travel, or actually when you interact and do a story for, I don't know, say Mongabay, you're interacting with these people who are your sources for a story. It's good to keep those relationships, because if there is an opportunity for you to then travel to that place, you might be able to hang out with that person. Maybe they can get you in the field. Maybe they can help you. So you know, it's just good to maintain relationships like that. The other organization I'll point out is Earth Journalism Network. They offer some grants for travel, especially to sort of these international climate talks and things like that. So they usually have like a dozen journalists that they will fund to go attend some talks. So there's also training involved with that. So that's another one to look out for.
Great. I think that actually leads into another question that will go really well. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. Just talk a little bit about you guys. Okay, so this is from Alex. So what kinds of conferences does Mongabay staff attend? You know, Association for Tropical Biology, IUCN World Congress. I mean, are there any things that you guys go to that are really helpful that other people in their future career might consider?
So I personally have trouble reporting from conferences. I find that there's usually so much going on, and you're almost too close to the action sometimes. I also am often speaking at a conference too, so it's just hard to speak and report on the same conference at the same time. But that said, I've gone to you know, the climate talks before. I often go to ATBC, which is a scientific conference, Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation. Maybe I think Jeremy may have had more luck or experience actually reporting for conferences. Usually when I'm there, I'm kind of wearing multiple hats. Sometimes I'm even advising or, like, you know, helping a foundation or something. So I'll let Jeremy take over.
I mean, there are a lot of different conferences you can attend. So I think there's two different ways to look at this. There's the conferences that are more related to the subjects that you're covering, and so you attend it as a journalist to cover. So as Rhett said, the Association for Tropical Biology, both Rhett and I have covered those and attended those, and Rhett's been to a number of those, and those are fabulous. You can sit in these, you know, small rooms for 7-8 days and listen to scientists rattle on about their science for hours. I mean, but it's amazing because you catch all this science a lot of it before it's been published, and you get to talk to the scientists, and then afterwards, when you're all sick of hearing, you know, science, you go out and you get a beer, and then the fun, you know, then you get to hear the stories of their field experiences and them trying to catch this rare frog or whatever. So you get to know, and that's how you kind of build contacts too. But you can come away with a lot of stories. I mean, I would go with a notebook, and I would just come away with all these ideas, and usually what I end up doing is interviews, because it's a lot easier to sort of get them and get all their science and get their ideas and their views in an interview than for me to try and, like, write what I remember. And I do take notes during the conference, and sometimes I'll do, you know, individual stories. But it's really, for me, I found those kind of conferences are really great for meeting people and getting people's interest in Mongabay and doing interviews and those kind of things. I've also, last year I attended the ZAC conference, which is the Zoological or Zoos and Aquariums Committee into Conservation, and it's a really interesting conference where zoos and aquariums meet up with conservationists who are working in the field, and basically it's like, how can we work better together, and how can we raise more money for conservation in the field through zoos and aquariums. And that was fascinating, and I actually got to give a talk there. But that, again, was a great place to meet people. I made a lot of contacts and did a bunch of different stories about that tension, and how zoos and aquariums are doing and funding conservation, and whether or not they're doing enough, which I think they're not. But they're working. Some of the good ones are working towards it. But then there's also conferences specifically for journalists. I attended a conference that was specifically for environmental journalists this year, and that's a totally different game because you're not actually there to cover things. You're there to sort of make connections, hear about what's going on, visit different sites, and it's more of a kind of meet and greet and get to know people and learn about various things that are happening in journalism. And you can come away with some stories, certainly. But it was really just good to meet other journalists that I've been reading for years and hear their stories and kind of powwow and meet other people who are interested in working for Mongabay and get Mongabay out there a little bit too. So that's a great way. So there's different ways, but once you get on these conferences lists, they'll continue to come to you, and if you start to speak at some too, sometimes they'll offer you funding and that kind of stuff. You can often get grants to go to attend these conferences too. So if you're a student or if you're someone who's just looking for a way to attend something like this, you should look into these conferences because they often give grants and fellowships. We've had past interns who have attended these conferences through grants and fellowships, and it's a really great way just to kind of get to know more of the business or cover some different stories.
Yeah, and then also once you're there, if you get one of these fellowships, then you can go out and do your own reporting. So a lot of times the big expense is just getting there, and then you can go out in the field for a few days afterwards. So as my travel has changed over the years, going from kind of more expedition type travel to essentially just going to places because I have to be there. So like for Indonesia, I'll tack on like 5 days on one of my Indonesia trips and then go out to the field. So it's a great way to get opportunities like that. I just had a couple of tips, I guess, for conferences. I do sometimes generate a bunch of stories when I go to a conference, like sometimes like 4 or 5 stories a day kind of thing. And the key to that is, this is probably normal for most people. Back in the old days, it wasn't. I always have a laptop, I use a laptop, maybe it's an iPad for other people, but I'm always taking notes. So I'm like constantly taking notes when I'm in in a conference setting, and capturing all those notes makes it really easy to then, on the computer, makes it really easy to then convert it to a story. So it has a really fast turnaround for kind of the shorter type stories. The other thing that you're probably aware of now is when you do interviews, like record interviews and having to transcribe an interview, it takes a really long time. People also don't necessarily speak the same way they talk, so you end up with people who sound great when you're listening to them, but when you're actually transcribing it, sometimes it's contradictory or doesn't make much sense. So you end up with a lot of content you can't really use. So that's why at Mongabay we've kind of shifted towards doing a lot of email interviews or just asking questions via email, because people can think about what they want to say and then come back to you with something. So if you're doing kind of gotcha journalism or trying to get a quote from like a Palmo executive or something, then first-person interview or a phone interview makes sense. But if you're just trying to tease out thoughtful answers or background information, then I much prefer doing it via email, because it takes like 1/10 the time as doing a phone call and transcribing it and then having to send it back, then realizing that what was said doesn't make any sense, and then you have to go back again. So anyway, that's just a little bit of advice for turning things around quickly.
Great. And yeah, I'll add that I was lucky enough to accompany Jeremy to a couple of the ATBC conferences, which was kind of funny as an outsider, because I was an outsider then. I wasn't working for Mongabay. But just that element of we would plan travel that Jeremy could write about, but that was also just really interesting. So like we volunteered with leatherback sea turtles in Suriname, and then we went to Iwakurama in Guyana and did some experiences there, and that it was really great to, like Rhett said, go to this conference specifically for that, but then kind of extend travel around. That was really helpful. I also wanted to add, Jeremy mentioned that he did a talk at the Association for Zoos and Aquariums. I don't know what it's called, but Rhett's done a few talks too. I think you guys have all seen when you reach out to contacts a lot of times when they actually get back to you. Sometimes scientists are in the field and doing other things and don't respond quite quickly. But we are highlighting their work in a really public way, and I think most scientists are really glad to talk to us and happy to have their work highlighted. And the presentation that Jeremy did at that conference was actually about what scientists could do to better work with journalists and get their stories told a little bit better. So, as you're out there, as you're emailing contacts for stories, and like Rhett said, kind of maintaining those relationships for future endeavors, if you really have a good rapport with someone and they're saying like, okay, well, what can I do? What can I do better? Just know that Mongabay does have some resources that we could potentially point them to. Just kind of keep that in your mind of like building those established relationships and keeping them going. So just wanted to add that quickly. All right. Doing good. I'm going to look for any raised hands. Liz, I'm tempted to have you introduce your cat, but I want to put you on the spot. I keep seeing a tail go by the screen. Okay. I don't see any hands, so I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet. So Rhett and Jeremy, I'd love for you to both talk about this. So are there particular investments, I think you guys both came to this career in a really unique way, but, have you talked to any other journalists or just things that you've done that you felt really paid off early in your career that brought you to this point? There was a hand. I'll look for it later. We'll get to this one first.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. So are there particular things that your and Rhett's journeys to the field of environmental journalism are a little different, I would say, but is there anything from your past or even knowing other journalists that you feel you have made that have really paid off and brought you to where you are? Like, I guess just advice in terms of other things that people can do, whether that's school, training programs, experiences, things like that we haven't covered already. I know we've talked a lot about some of this.
I guess I can start with this. So, I mean, my journey was very weird because I was an English major and I love novels, and then I did a master's in the great books where we read like philosophy and novels and all this. I was a humanities person, so so when I started writing for Mongabay, I didn't have any science background, and I had never taken a journalism class, and I still to this day have never taken a class in journalism. Don't tell anyone. But I think I think what it really takes in journalism, from my own experience and from talking to other journalists, is it's a lot of perseverance. It's a willingness to it's a love of storytelling and a love of I think a certain maybe righteous indignation or a love of some kind of justice, some kind of better world. At least for the kind of journalism that I think most of us care about. So I think in that you're willing to go through some of the hardships of journalism, which it isn't an easy career and it isn't going to make you a ton of money and that kind of stuff, but there's a real need for it. And I think it's really a willingness to continue to work hard, and I think being able to tell a gripping story and use quotes well and kind of put the reader there is a really good skill. So basically, I would say for me, what I think got me in the door, and maybe Rhett can deny this or agree, I don't know, but I worked really hard on my writing, and that was my #1 thing, was writing. And I think in order to be a good writer, you have to be a really good reader, and you have to read a lot, both fiction and nonfiction, I would say. And I think for being a good journalist, it's just important to read a lot of other people's work and try and learn from the best journalists out there. And then it's about perseverance and patience and maybe a willingness to kind of take a long time. And I think, I guess I'm testament to the fact that you don't have to have a journalism degree. You don't have to have a science degree. In fact, I think in some ways not having those can be actually a little bit beneficial. But I'm sure that it's also beneficial to have one of those or either. So I think people go in different ways and different journeys, but I think that it's really a lot of it's perseverance and willing to kind of put up with some of the difficulties of this career, which is changing rapidly, and it's putting up with a lot of uncertainty, maybe in where your next paycheck is coming from. But you might have a dogged willingness to seek out some truth and to get that message across to your readers, and that's and to get it across in a way that is well written, and there's a lot of thought into it. So I guess that's what I would say would be some of the most important things for sort of seeking a journalism career, whether it's covering environmental stories or any kind of journalism.
Yeah, so I'm even a worse example than Jeremy in terms of being abnormal. I don't have a background in journalism or environment, and I think I wrote a total of 2 papers in all of college. So, yeah, so I'm not really a good example, I guess, of a path to follow. But I will say that working hard is really important. Also being flexible. So we interact with enough journalists now where some journalists or some contributors won't necessarily be flexible, and it's definitely hard to work with them. The other thing is that it's good not to burn bridges or go apeshit crazy if something doesn't go your way. We've encountered some people who just go totally nuts about a really minor thing, and we can't really work with them in the future if it's going to be that difficult. So I think just being flexible and accepting, and it's fine to argue your point and things like that, but going completely off the deep end, which has happened a couple of times in the last 5 years, and is always kind of shocking to us, is probably something that you want to avoid. It's also good to communicate clearly in terms of what your goals are, your desires are, or if there's something really important about your piece, you should just communicate that, because you don't want people to try to read your mind. I also don't read. I'm also a bad example because I don't really read that much anymore. I don't really have time. So in terms of, I think it'd be helpful to read other writers, or at least starting out, read other journalists and get inspiration. But I don't personally do it. So I think what it shows is that they're all different paths to take. But if I were to do it over again, I'd probably say that reading a whole bunch of blogs and well-known environmental journalists would be helpful.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
if I can I just add one more thing? I think one thing that I really like to see in sort of journalists working with us is somebody who's willing to kind of go the extra mile, whether that be track down an extra source, find some extra photos, write a little longer piece, a little more in depth if it was something that was more superficial to, if we just sort of gave you a paper and said, here, do what you want with it. If they get a little more in depth or provide some extra context, or pitch something to us, come up with your own ideas, or write an op-ed. Those are always things that I think, at least from us, shows a little more ambition and intuition. And I know a lot of people kind of shy away from that and say, oh, I don't really feel I'm ready for that. I don't want to. Well, and I totally understand that hesitation because I deal with that on a daily basis. But I think it's really good to try and put yourself out there and to show us that you're wanting to take a little extra on, or do a little extra, or put a little extra into your articles, and that really shows that you're, really, this is a real passion of yours. And for some people, the internship is, oh, I did this internship, I thought I wanted to be an environmental journalist, and now I don't. And that's great too, because you're learning what you want, and you maybe find out, well, I want to go back into science, or I want to go do this, or I want to do this. But I still think everyone gets something out of it, because even scientists have to learn how to communicate with the public, and I think this internship helps a lot with that. So I'm not saying you have to do our internship and discover that that's what you want to do. Not at all. But I think for the ones who do feel like, oh, this is actually this is really great, I'm really enjoying this, then definitely come forward and pitch us something, come up with something. Find a local story, or kind of say, hey, can I, what do you need from me? Can I take on an extra story? That always just kind of shows that you're really wanting to, that this is something that you're really enjoying, and we're getting feedback. Because I know that we're very busy, and sometimes we aren't always the best at sort of being like, hey, do you need anything else? Do you want anything else? So you can definitely come, but feel free. We are definitely available, and so come to us and tell us if you have an idea for a story and that kind of thing. So I would say that's not just Mongabay. I think that's important for any kind of journalism, that you need to put yourself out there. You need to learn how to kind of go up, to talk to editors and pitch editors and send emails. And, as long as you're nice and polite, like Rhett said, as long as you're not a crazy person, I think people really take it well. And, I think that burning bridges is really important. Just take edits well, be nice, be polite, be understanding of various deadlines and various things where editors are coming from, because they're coming from different places. And so just try and really kind of, and I know that can be hard, but I think that, vent to your friends, vent to your partner, vent to all those people, but don't vent too much to the editors, because that might not go well. Yeah, that's just some advice.
I would also just add that it's good to be resourceful. So, I'm not a photographer, but originally when I started Mongabay, I had no photos, and now I've taken over 120,000 and posted them on the website. So I'm always taking photos wherever I go. So it's just an example. But another example, if you're not traveling or don't have those opportunities, is to do things like if there's a table of data, turning that into a graph or something can be really useful. Thinking about different ways to visualize content and just add to your story.
Great. All right, we're closing in on the end of the hour, so I want to catch that hand. Who had a hand up earlier that I missed? Yay, go for it. Can you unmute yourself at the top?
Yep.
Hi.
Okay, am I speaking? Okay, that's cool. I struggle a lot when I'm asking questions to whoever I'm contacting. So not like, I'm not in agony, but I mean like, I have to think for a minute about what questions to ask, and like, if I ask this question, are they going to give me an interesting answer that I could maybe use in my article? So if there's anything you guys keep in mind when you're asking questions, maybe just tell us some tips on, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I can start with that. Yeah, I think asking questions is really difficult, especially with scientists, because some of them continue to write like scientists, and you have to try. I mean, I've been adding to my emails to scientists, being like, remember, it's a general audience. Try, and that's one thing I did at my talk at the conference, was basically talking to scientists as to how to talk to the public. And so I think it can be really difficult sometimes to get questions where you can draw them out. I would say try and give questions that are going to get very clear responses. It's okay to ask questions that are obvious in the paper. If you've read the paper and the question is answered in the paper, I still ask the question because I want to hear it in different words. I don't want to just quote the paper. So I think that's important. And then I think too is one good way to sometimes do it is to send just a few questions to begin with, maybe 3 or 4, and then once you see how they write, follow up with more. And you can always say, like, could you go, like, oh, you mentioned you did field work with this animal, or you mentioned you did this. Could you go into depth, or could you tell me about that? Because I think for me, I love getting quotes where they actually go into detail about their work and their lives. I mean, you want to hear about the results, but it's also fun to hear about them scrabbling up a hill to try and find something. That's where they I think that's a good gripping thing. So I think, it's okay to ask redundant questions. It's okay to let scientists and conservationists know that this is for a general publication and that you want them to speak in general terms. And I think it's really just trying to get their words as to what, and a lot of times scientists have a hard time doing this too, but why do their results matter? I mean, who should care and why? And a lot of times scientists are maybe hesitant, but that's fine to ask that question. Like, I've often asked, like, okay, you've discovered this species is almost extinct. Why should anyone care? What does this matter? And you get very interesting answers between ecosystem services and the moral views. Just that if it's not a charismatic species per se, then you can get some really interesting answers. So I think asking questions like that can be really can elicit some good feedback. And I think also that comes with establishing relationships with scientists. The longer you work with specific scientists, the better questions and the better answers, I think, as you kind of get to know each other, you can get. So I think that's and we kind of have I sort of have a set draft of various questions that I ask when I first start working with someone. But also the other thing is, if you are having trouble with what questions to ask, send us the questions. I'd be very happy to look at them, or Morgan or Rhett, anybody, and we can give you our impressions, or Tiffany. She's been working with a lot of journalists, so she's starting to understand how this all works really well. So yeah, send us the questions, and we'd be very happy to look. I mean, we should be a resource for you guys. So that's definitely something that you should do. And I think that we can give quick feedback, and that might help a lot too. So, Rhett, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just emphasize the point of not to send like a huge list of questions initially. I know that when I get a huge list of questions, it just goes down on my priority list. So, just sending a couple well thought out questions to start is a good way to begin.
That makes me think that maybe I should look at that template that we have in the first round and cut the questions down a little bit. But I would also add that, like Rhett said earlier, we're not trying to focus on gotcha journalism. I mean, we're often doing a service for these people that we're, in contact with, and allowing them to have a voice. And so, I think it's okay sometimes for you to be a little bit more direct in terms of saying, like, I really want to paint a, wider picture. So, maybe let's, there's just ways that you can be more clear with them for what you're hoping for, especially if you do ask like 2-3 questions and get like Spock's answer of, nothing, which has happened many times. You know, there are polite ways to respond back and just say like, let's try something else. Let's try asking this in a different way. So, and if you ever, you know, it's kind of a theme of this call, but if you do want some advice or a second set of eyes, you know, third set of eyes, fourth set, we're more than happy to do that. I know, you know, we're a small staff and we're doing a lot and we're busy, but in terms of my own priority, when I see something coming from an intern in my inbox, and especially if it's something that they need help with, that's at the top of my priority list, and I know that it's also at the top of Morgan and Rhett's and Jeremy's as well. So you are very important to us, so we'll make every effort to help you where we can. It's Friday night, and it's...
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
Sorry. No, but so most of the time when we're talking to scientists, it is not about like we're trying to get them to say something ridiculous or, you know, but if you are talking to, say, a company, or if you're talking to somebody that, or a politician or somebody that you want to get, you're trying to get a little bit, you know, more information, I think the best thing, and Rhett, you can jump in on this too, but is to send very few questions to begin with, maybe like 2 or 3, make them general, basically get them to respond, and then you start to slowly amp up the questions. You know, and that's kind of whether or not you're doing it in person, or whether or not you're doing it on the phone, or whether or not you're doing it via email. A lot of times, places like that, once they kind of figure out what's going on, they'll just sort of. I've had places basically shut me down and threaten a lawsuit. You know, but in the meantime, I've gotten some good information, or at least some reaction. So that's a whole different game. But I think the idea of still sending fewer questions and kind of getting yourself in there, but it's a little bit different of a head game, because you're really trying to get information that they either probably don't want to give you or don't want to go in too much detail. So it's a different way to do it, but I think, you know, interns, you often don't have to get into that quite as much, but as you go through your internship, I do hope that you have the experience of sort of trying to get some answers from someone who isn't wanting to talk too much or as much about the issue, because that's a very different thing. But those are sort of, you know, and definitely if you get in that situation where you're asking those questions, you should, you know, it's great to check with us ahead of time and get some more advice from us. But both Rhett and I have dealt with, you know, various groups and companies and things that, you know, don't really want us asking those questions. So that's just more advice on how to ask questions.
Great. All right, so we are out of time, and I don't want this to go on too much longer. I just thought I'd open it up for Rhett and Jeremy to say any final words, as you have current, former, and future interns on this call, which is accurate. If you want to have, you know, say one last piece.
Yeah, I guess I can go first. I would just say, first of all, a big thank you. This program has been really successful. We've produced, interns have produced hundreds of articles. Like we said, there's been a number of interns who have gone on to do freelance journalism with some pretty impressive stats behind them already. And the program's only been going on for, what, a year and a half, 2 years? 2 years? So that's, you know, and I think there's been a number of interns too who have gotten to do this program and then decided, oh, this, you know, I don't want to be an environmental journalist, but now I kind of see where I do. I want to be a conservationist, or I want to go back to school. We have a number of people who have done the internship who are now doing PhD programs in various sciences and other things. So, you know, I think that it first of all, just a big thank you. Second of all, I would just say, you know, try and get as much out of it as you can. And this is a really great opportunity to sort of test this career without like having to, you know, pay the bills with it, or like kind of gives you a chance to sort of, do you like writing? Do you like, you know, writing about the sciences? Do you like writing about environmental issues? Is this something that you're passionate enough to really make a go of? Or is this pointing you in other directions, which is, you know, is great as well, because God knows we need more conservationists out there. We need more scientists. So I would just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for all the amazing work that you've done. I've met so many incredible writers through this, and I've worked with great people, and I've gotten to learn how to be an editor, which I have no experience with. So I appreciate people putting up with that. So yeah, just a really big thank you, and just know that, you know, even if we're busy, we are really appreciative of all that you guys are doing, and that you should always come to us as a resource. I have interns who have, you know, I haven't heard from in a year and a half, you know, who are some of our first interns who once in a while send me an email asking for a recommendation or asking for my opinion or just catching up with me a little bit, and that's great, and we're very happy to do that. So, you know, I think just make the best use of it that you can. I know you all have busy lives and you all have other things going on, but it's really a great chance to sort of test these waters, and there's a lot of different things you can do after the internship and still use some of the skills you get from kind of working with reading scientific papers and writing about them, and learning about conservation issues and environmental issues that maybe you didn't know about before. And I think that that's just awesome. And we've built this amazing sort of army now of interns who are going on and doing amazing things. And that's, to me, that's most of the point of the internship, is watching these people go on and do amazing things using some of the skills and some of the experiences that they got through Mongabay. So I thank you.
Yeah, so Jeremy covered most of the bases there, but I would just reiterate the thank you. Also that the internship program is kind of what you get out of it is kind of what you put in. So I think everyone on the call is putting in quite a bit, but the more you put in, the more likely it could lead to something interesting. In terms of Mongabay, we are launching this new program next year, which should offer more opportunities. So there will be a path to transition from being an intern to being in this contributor program, which we're really excited about. So hopefully some of you guys will be interested in that, and we can continue working with you in a new capacity as well. So thanks again.
Yeah, a sincere thank you. When I started part-time with Mongabay, I actually started doing what Brittany was doing by coordinating translators, and then Rhett had a few people on early who were doing some amazing work, and he called them interns and he passed them on to me. And I thought that there was enough people who really loved this site that I thought we could ramp up this program, and it has proven to be the case that we have just seen the most fantastic people come through, and I have really loved getting to know you all via email, which is sometimes weird. It's great to see some faces, but yeah, just a sincere thank you. It has been a true career highlight so far to kind of manage this program and see all of the work that you guys are able to do. And so with that said, I think we're gonna stop it here. But thank you all for joining, watching live on YouTube. I see that there are YouTube. I can see the little note. There are people who are watching live on YouTube, and future interns will be able to see this recording too. But yeah, I look forward to seeing your names in my inbox, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.